What if cannabis holds the power to unlock a truth, a well-guarded secret, an answer protected by those with power since ancient times? Is it possible that everything we have been told about cannabis is a lie? What if those in power discovered the true abilities of cannabis and created a false narrative? A fictional story about cannabis in order to direct us away from the answers, the truths, the knowledge that cannabis holds? It is very possible. Could cannabis be the key that unlocks a clear understanding about life, the afterlife, and what happens to our only revered as the portal to the divine? A gift from heaven, but the story was changed. And the lessons taught by those in power told us it was the portal to hell. Why? What is being hidden from us?
Hi everybody. Thank you for watching indigotv. Everyone please hit those like and subscribe buttons so we can get back to the video. Thanks, you're the best.
In ancient temples, smoke from a sacred plant would fill the air. It was cherished as a divine gift. It was a bridge to the ethereal, a tool for prophets, shamans, and sages, offering humanity a glimpse into deeper truths and a connection to something beyond. Over time, however, rituals faded. Reverence dissolved, and the once hallowed portal became simply a myth. Over time, this plant's deeper purpose has been lost, forgotten, or intentionally hidden. It doesn't merely soothe the physical, it awakens something profound within us. The ancients didn't seek escape when they lit the plant, they sought entrance into the unseen, into the very essence of the soul. To them, cannabis was the key that opened a portal. The plant provided exposure to the divine. And in that exposure lay its holiness. Was this the unique power it offered and the reason it was hidden? Was it out of fear to protect others or so the exposed reality could be controlled? The question one must ask is, what was exposed? Was it a portal to access the divine? Is that the secret that has been kept hidden? If so, were we lied to in order for someone or some group to retain power and control? Chants would fill the air. Fasts were observed, and nights were spent in stillness, waiting for the plant to speak. Cannabis didn't speak loudly, it whispered, and only those who were truly still could hear it. But the rituals shifted, and before long, no one even knew what to listen for or how to listen. What was once a sacred routine vanished forever. It was the belief that every sacred plant was not just a gift, it was a mirror. And mirrors don't flatter, they reflect. So, what was reflected, and more importantly, are we ready or able to see? They said it was just a plant, a leaf, a stem, a scent wrapped in nostalgia and rebellion. But what if it's not? What if that humble green curl isn't merely a substance, but a structure? What if it's a gate? We walk through it casually, lighting it, inhaling, smiling. Yet every act of fire, every breath drawn, is a key turning inside something far older than we imagine. This is not kale or chamomile, it doesn't just calm. It calls, not outward, but inward, to corners we've long left in shadow, to memories we've buried under convenience, to wounds we've wrapped in logic and forgotten to feel. Cannabis is different because this plant reflects. It hands us a mirror and asks us to look not at the world, but at ourselves, at our beliefs, our core, and our exterior. That's why some laugh and others cry. Why some float while others fall. The plant doesn't create emotion, it amplifies it. It doesn't hand you clarity, it shows you how to navigate the fog. In that moment, you realize this isn't about the plant at all. It's about the person holding it. The ancient mystics understood. They didn't smoke to escape, they descended into the cavern of the soul, walking barefoot through memory, archetype, and dream, guided by rituals, chants, and silence. A mirror without preparation doesn't show truth, it shows distortion. Without grounding, distortion becomes a spiral. This is why the same leaf can bring wisdom or paranoia, peace or restlessness, insight or illusion. The plant is neutral, waiting for your intention. If you bring reverence, it deepens. If you bring fear, it intensifies. If you bring numbness, it mirrors back the void. This is why the temple matters, the space, the silence, the readiness. A portal is not a playground, you don't enter with noise. You enter with stillness, respect, and discernment. Behind the smoke, behind the relaxation, behind the cultural aesthetic, lies a threshold. Some doors, once they are opened, do not close quietly. Before dispensaries, before signs flashing 420 and bobbleheads blowing smoke on TikTok, there were temples. In those temples, cannabis wasn't smoked, it was offered, burned slowly like incense, it was lit to contact, to summon. In the Ava, one of the oldest texts in India, cannabis was called one of the 5 sacred plants. A divine gift, a bearer of Amrita, the nectar of immortality. It was ritual, a bridge between Shiva, the destroyer of illusion, and the ascetic sages who walked barefoot into the fire of consciousness. These mystics fasted, they chanted, they sat for hours in silence. To them, the smoke was an offering. In Taoist China, records from ancient alchemists like Ge Hong described formulas combining cannabis with ginseng and other sacred herbs, not to get high, but to dream lucidly, unlock astral temples in the mind, and stretch perception past the physical into the realms of immortal insight. These were initiates, not influencers. They didn't just use the plant, they prepared for it because they knew a key in the wrong lock could break the door entirely. In medieval Sufism, especially in branches tucked into North Africa and Persia, hashish wasn't taken for pleasure. It was taken with prayer, poetry, and surrender. The goal was fana, the annihilation of the ego to dissolve into divine presence. Mystics would gather beneath moonlight, reciting verses of Rumi, feeling the veils thin with each inhalation. But even then, there were warnings. Why seek God in drunkenness if he already dances sober within you? It wasn't the substance, it was the space, the ritual, the container. Even among the ancient Hebrews, though the word cannabis doesn't explicitly appear, some scholars like Sula Benet and Raphael Meckelum suggest that Khan Bosom, a fragrant element of Moses' holy anointing oil in the Book of Exodus, was likely a reference to cannabis resin. If true, then the sacred oils of the high priest used to bless temples, kings, and prophets may have carried the psychoactive essence of the very plant, the same plant we know today. This is the forgotten temple, not a building, but a way of approaching the sacred. Cannabis in its origins was not inhaled in chaos. It was invited in ceremony. The silence before, the breath during, the integration after. Back then, they lit the plant beside altars and watched visions rise with the smoke. So the question isn't whether cannabis is sacred. It always was. The question is, have we forgotten how to meet it? When the temple is gone and only the ember remains, we risk mistaking ashes for the flame. They say it was Shiva who first breathed it in, not in rebellion. Not in escape, but in sacred solitude beneath a crescent moon. Wrapped in ash and silence. In Hindu cosmology, Shiva is the destroyer, the cosmic dancer whose rhythm dissolves illusion. He doesn't coddle, he confronts. And through destruction, he clears the path for truth. It is Shiva, Lord of Transformation, who is most intimately connected to cannabis. In the sacred text of India, the Shiva Purana, the plant is said to have sprouted from the earth where drops of Amrita fell during the great churning of the ocean. From that soil emerged Bhang, a preparation of cannabis leaves used in offerings to Shiva himself as a divine sacrament. Today, across the Indian subcontinent, the wandering ascetics known as sadhus still carry the torch of that ancient practice. Their hair matted like roots of the earth, their bodies smeared in holy ash. Their minds pointed only inward. They are the seekers, and their relationship with cannabis is one of annihilation, the annihilation of the ego. During long meditations in mountain caves or on temple steps, the sadhu lights the chillum, to burn away identity layer by layer. Each puff is a funeral pyre, each exhale a letting go. They chant Bam Bam Bole, invoking Shiva as the smoke curls like sacred script across their foreheads. The plant is their mirror, revealing the attachments they must burn, the illusions they must dissolve. Yet, even within India, not all agree. Some gurus warn that cannabis, when misused, doesn't dissolve the ego, it inflates it. Without proper fasting, chanting, and silence, the plant becomes a distraction, a hollow mimicry of transcendence. Swami Sivananda, one of the great modern saints, cautioned against relying on any substance for spiritual growth. God is not in the smoke, he said, but in the stillness behind the eyes. Still, for the sadhus, who have walked away from society, renounced possessions, names, and even families, cannabis remains a companion, not for comfort, but for confrontation. They say when you walk alone into the Himalayas with only the wind and your own mind, the plant teaches you how to die before your body ever does, not a high, but a death, and from that death, rebirth. It's a right the modern world cannot comprehend because it's about the sacred posture we hold before it, the discipline, the devotion, the divine madness that turns smoke into the ascending steps of a staircase. They told us Shiva breathed it in. which he did only after dissolving the self into nothing but flame. In the stillness of ancient China, where mist wraps around mountains like whispered prayers, where silence holds more truth than speech, there lived the alchemists of Tao. They were seekers of the eternal breath of immortality, but not the kind written in marble or myth. Rather, the soft, radiant kind that lives within a body completely attuned to the currents of the universe. And among the scrolls, among the powdered roots and pearls, there was a name spoken with reverence and caution: cannabis. In Taoist tradition, this plant was never seen as poison nor as pleasure. It was a herb of vision, a key to inner portals. But only if the lock was already prepared. Taoist sage Ge Hong in the Bopuzi described recipes that mixed cannabis with ginseng and resin of fir to provoke lucid dreams, visions of the celestial realms, and communication with immortals. But there was a warning hidden in the margins: if the body was impure, if the mind was unstable, if the qi, the life force, was chaotic, the plant wouldn't open the heavens, it would open the shadows. In Taoism, every element carries a vibration, every substance has a frequency. Cannabis was believed to amplify the qi of the user. If your energy was harmonious, the plant could extend life, bring prophetic dreams, even enhance the subtle senses. But if your energy was scattered, it would fragment further, like tuning an instrument too tightly until the strings snap. The alchemist called it the mirror herb because they knew it doesn't add. It reflects. Used with precision in deep meditation after long purification, it was an elixir. Used without direction, it became poison, not the kind that kills the body, but the kind that numbs the spirit. In modern language, we might say it affects the endocannabinoid system, touching mood, perception, pain, and memory. But in Taoist alchemy, this was simply the dance of yin and yang, moving too quickly, spinning before the body was ready. And so they warned. This is not a leaf to be burned in boredom. This is not a tool for the impatient. Cannabis may expand your perception, yes, but if you have not first grounded yourself, it will also expand your illusions. What good is seeing the stars if you no longer know which way is up? So the masters, when they did use the herb, did so only after discipline, after silence, after fasting, not to chase visions, but to receive them. Because in Taoism, the body is an altar, and the plant, if respected, becomes incense to the divine. But used carelessly, without alignment, without humility, it becomes smoke that clouds rather than clarifies in the quiet chambers of the Taoist adepts. They say one thing more: don't mistake movement for progress, and don't mistake expansion for awakening. Because cannabis, like fire, can warm the soul or consume it. There is a silence that comes not from absence, but from the unraveling of identity. And in that silence, the mystics knew how and what to listen for. From the winding alleys of medieval Persia to the dervish circles under crescent moonlight, the Sufis danced not for performance but for disappearance. They called it fana, the annihilation of the self in the presence of the divine. And sometimes, there was smoke. Hashish, in certain branches of Islamic mysticism, was more than a substance, it was seen as a veil remover, a sacrament for piercing the illusion of separation. It was said to dull the voice of the ego just long enough for the soul to whisper. But not all Sufis agreed. Even in the mystic's house, there was caution. There were walls built not from rules but from reverence. Some, like the ecstatic wanderers of the Calendaria order, embraced the herb in their sacred rites. In the dim glow of lanternlit gatherings, they would chant the names of God, inhale deeply, and spin into themselves, seeking obliteration in the boundaries of the self. For them, the plant was a bridge, a rope lowered into the abyss. Rumi, the beloved poet of the soul, offered a warning wrapped in velvet: why seek God in drunkenness? He asked, if he already dances sober within you. Rumi was not condemning the plant, he was illuminating the danger of the shortcut, that anything which becomes a crutch, no matter how sacred, can become a prison. He knew the intoxicated mind could mistake flashes for the sun, that ecstasy untethered from devotion was just another trick of the ego. And it is here that the real lesson of the Sufis takes shape, because for them, hashish was never the teacher, it was a door. Not all who entered returned with wisdom. Some returned disoriented, entangled in illusions mistaken for insight. The mystics knew that not all visions are revelations, that light can blind as easily as it can guide, and that a seeker without grounding is like a candle in the wind, beautiful, flickering, and easily extinguished. Even the mystics who claim to see the face of God in everything treaded lightly. They fasted, they prayed, they wept on worn rugs for hours before daring to alter the veil between this world and the unseen. Because to knock on the door of the infinite while intoxicated with self was to be devoured. And perhaps that's the real essence of Fana, not a high, not a thrill, but the sacred destruction of the illusion of control. There are places where smoke means communion, where breath becomes offering. Among the Rastafari, the ebb is holy. They call it ganja, the healing of the nations, the green sacrament, the gift of Jah. And when they gather, they do not light up in isolation, drowning out the world in silence. They gather in circles, calling them reasoning sessions. And this is where the herb reveals its truth. In these circles, there is no hierarchy, no preacher, no pulpit, only the word spoken. Past, reflected. The smoke moves in rhythm with the voice, a puff, a pause, a truth. And in that flow, something ancient awakens. They speak not to be heard, but to uncover, to peel back the noise of the world and meet themselves and each other without disguise. This is not intoxication. It is invocation. The reasoning is a ritual, the ganja is incense. The circle becomes a cathedral without walls. And Jah, the living God, listens from within. Born in the soil of resistance, Rastafari was never just a religion, it was a rebellion of the spirit against empire, against oppression, against every system that told the soul it was small. And in this rebellion, the ebb became a symbol not of escape but of sacred defiance. Haile Selassie, the Lion of Judah, was seen not just as a man but as a living echo of prophecy. And the herb? The bridge between the ancient promises and the modern struggle. But even here, there are unspoken rules. A man who smokes alone, without reflection, without prayer, is not a mystic, he is a wanderer. For Rastafari, the power of ganja comes from alignment, from intention. The heart must be clean. The mind must be open. The smoke must be lifted not for numbness but for wisdom. Because the ebb amplifies whatever is inside. If the soul is confused, the smoke will deepen the fog. If the soul is clear, the smoke becomes clarity. As the book of Revelation says, the leaves of the tree are for the healing of the nations. But healing does not happen in haste. It happens in rhythm, in breath, in presence. The ebb is sacred when the hands that hold it are clean with purpose. The Rastafari teach by living. Not in temples, but in gardens, not with dogma, but with discipline. They do not chase visions, they do not worship the plant. They let it guide them gently toward something deeper, a remembering. And in that sacred circle beneath the stars, within the drumbeat of the heart, you begin to understand. It was never about getting high, it was about getting home. They called it a gift, a plant of peace, a key to vision. But what if its power is not to show the heavens but to reflect the soul? Cannabis doesn't create truth, it reveals. It peels away the mask, and what it reveals, many are not able or ready to see. It is a mirror that it holds. Carl Jung, the mystic psychologist, once said, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." This plant does not offer comfort, it offers confrontation. Behind the smoke, the mirrors begin to rise. And suddenly, you're not looking at the world. You're looking at yourself, the anxieties, the forgotten grief, the impulses you've silenced with distractions, the questions you've buried beneath years of noise. Your mask begins to dissolve, and what remains is raw, unfiltered, true. In Dion Fortune's writings on psychic defense, she warns that in altered states, without grounding, without guidance, your energy field becomes porous, unstable. Entities, ideas, even your unresolved energies find their way in, not because the plant is demonic, but because you are unguarded. It's not the ebb that opens the door, you do. The plant just removes the locks. And so you sit, breathing in smoke that smells of ancient rites. But instead of peace, you feel the pressure, not from outside, but from within. The test has begun. For some, the ebb amplifies creativity. For others, it awakens fear. But both are illusions if unprocessed. This is the danger, not the plant, but the pretense that we are using it consciously, when in truth, it's using us to reveal the cracks in our own soul. Yet this mirror is not cruel, it is a gift wrapped in smoke and silence. If you are willing to see, if you are willing to listen, if you are willing to stay, because truth doesn't shout in visions, it whispers from the reflection in your own eyes. The question is never will cannabis show you something. The question is, will you be brave enough to look? The Taoists knew this. They wrote of cannabis with reverence. Yes, but also with warning. In the biographies of immortals, ancient texts speak of how cannabis was combined with ginseng to awaken dreams and prolong life. But only for those in balance and harmony. Indigenous shamans speak of plant spirits, energies that don't just alter perception, but enter a dialogue with the user, if the user is listening, and they come with humility, preparation, intention. Carl Jung called it the shadow, the unacknowledged, the unseen, the parts of ourselves we exile to the basement of our psyche. Not because they are evil, but because they are uncomfortable, fear, shame, desire, old pain, ancient wounds carried through generations. And when we smoke, when the ego softens, when the boundaries blur, the door to that basement cracks open. Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. But fate has many disguises, and sometimes it wears a cloud of smoke. The spiritual traditions knew this long before psychology had a name for it. In the mystical texts of Kabbalah, the Klipot are described as shells, husks, layers that surround divine light. Created from imbalance, not evil by nature, but twisted by neglect. The same idea appears in Taoism. A body out of harmony becomes a house of distorted qi. And in that distortion, cannabis acts like a mirror that doesn't lie. Have you ever felt after smoking like your thoughts were watching you instead of the other way around? Like you were suddenly naked before yourself, not physically, but spiritually? This is the unveiling, and for many, it is terrifying because we mistake calm for safety. But cannabis doesn't always bring calm, sometimes it brings confrontation. That inner tightness, that racing heart, that whisper of dread, it's not the plant, it's the part of you that hasn't been met, hasn't been healed, hasn't been named. What happened? How was the sacrament lost? When colonialism arrived, it didn't just steal land, it stole language, it stole ritual, it stole meaning. Cannabis was criminalized in the West. But not because of its claimed danger, because of its unknown power, because of its roots, because it couldn't be controlled or separated from the mysticism of the people who understood its ability. The result? Generation after generation is surrounded by sacred tools but unaware of the process and rituals that allow access to a realm much deeper than we know. We light up but do not even know how or what to listen for. We consume but forget to honor. We seek peace but omit preparation. The old cultures knew a plant is sacred because it connects you to what otherwise you could not connect. Is this the reason why a sacred ritual, with a sacred plant, went from providing a portal to the divine, into the demonized plant it became?